Good. Okay. Good evening. My name is Cllr Shivraj Grewal, and I'm the chair of the Heston and Cranford Area Forum. It's now 6 p.m. and so I would like to welcome you all to the virtual meeting of the Heston and Central Area Forum. I would like to welcome the members of the Area Forum who are sitting this evening, as well as council officers who will be assisting members throughout the meeting. In addition, I would like to welcome members of the public who are watching this meeting at home. As you all may know, until recently, virtual meetings for council businesses were not legal, but as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the quarantine arrangements required by the government, the law has recently been changed to let local authorities meet in a virtual way to make decisions. Therefore, this meeting is taking place using the recently introduced government regulations. This way, this meeting will work will be that as a chair, I will be running the meeting and inviting people to speak. As it is very easy for people to speak over each other in meeting like this, I will ask each member or officer to speak in turn at the appropriate stage. This will mean that there should normally be no need for people to interrupt or to ask to speak. However, I shall make sure that members have ample opportunity to ask questions and make comments on the reports and the applications before them. The exception to this arrangement will be the council officers who may turn on their microphone to alert me to any procedural or constitutional issue that needs addressing. Although I would expect this to be a rare occurrence, in addition, we have procedures of the meeting from our ICT department who may also contact me if necessary, but I think it is unlikely if all goes well, and we hope it will. The etiquette for members of the area forum and for officers who are expecting to speak will be to mute your microphones until you're asked to speak. This means that only one person will be speaking at a time and there will be no background noise, making it easier for us all to follow the meeting and also for those watching at home. I will also ask members always to say who they are when they make a contribution and to speak slowly and clearly for the same reason. I would now like to introduce each of the members here tonight one by one. I would invite first Cllr Shivraj Grewal to introduce himself. Cllr Grewal.
I know that one or two councillors were having trouble joining, so perhaps Councillor Grewal, if you just want to carry on with the introductions, and then we'll pick anyone out that we missed.
No problem. I would invite Councillor Harleen Atwal.
I know she is definitely one of the two that was having some trouble joining, so we're just trying to resolve that.
I ask Councillor Surinder Purewal to introduce himself, please.
Hello, good evening. Myself, Surinder Singh Purewal. I'm from Heston Central. I'm a member of the committee panel or forum. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, Heston East Ward Councillor Kamaljeet Kaur. Okay, Councillor Gurmail Lal, please.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Gurmail Lal from Heston East.
Thank you very much. Councillor Amrit Maan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Amrit Maan, Heston East Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Harleen Atwal is here. If you would like to introduce yourself, please. Harleen.
Sorry, I do apologise. Councillor Harleen Atwal here, representing Heston Central Ward.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, we go to Heston West Ward. Councillor Lily Bath.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lily Bath, and I represent the Heston West Ward. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Shantanu Rajawat.
Good evening, Chair. It's Councillor Shantanu Rajawat from Heston West Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Balraj Sarai. Okay, then we have councillors for Cranford Ward. Councillor Poonam Dhillon, please.
Hello, good evening, Chair. I'm Councillor Poonam Dhillon from Cranford Ward.
Thank you very much, Poonam. Councillor Khalik Malik, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Khalik Malik representing Cranford Ward.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, now we move to the presentation to be done by Elliot Brooks. Could I ask him to do the presentation, please?
Sorry, Chair, can I quickly interrupt? Just got a message from Councillor Balraj Sarai. He is actually here at the meeting, but he wasn't able to introduce himself because for some reason he's having technical difficulties, but he says he is here, so hopefully if you can help him on that. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you very much. Okay. Hello, Elliot.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chair.
okay.
I think Moyna's got some slides she's going to share for me. You might want, yeah, thanks.
Could I ask everybody else to mute, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elliot Brooks, the Director of Communities. And as part of my remit, I have the responsibility for engagement and consultation for the council. So what the plan for this evening is to talk through a few slides which we have on the recent review of community engagement, and then to take any questions, or actually, as importantly, hear any ideas from members of the forum about our proposals and how we might move forward. Next slide, please, Moyna. Thank you. So you'll be aware that obviously during the coronavirus pandemic, the council was very aware that whilst we were all very much in response mode, there was going to need to be obviously a concerted effort to come out of the pandemic and into recovery. Obviously, we've got another lockdown starting this week, but I think the overall emphasis from the council at the moment, whilst keeping in mind some of the urgent issues that will come out during the second lockdown, the emphasis really does need to be on the longer term recovery from the pandemic. So on that basis, the council set up a recovery board, and underneath that there were 4 recovery task forces, one being the community recovery task force. It was chaired by Councillor Catherine Dunn, who's here this evening, and also had as a member Councillor Lily Bath, who's also here this evening. There was some overarching outcomes and aims of that community task force, and I've just detailed them here on the right hand side of the slide, but I'll go through them. And it was really that all residents are socially connected and live in pleasant neighbourhoods where they can play a role in their community. All residents and communities are involved in shaping the place they live and the services they receive by having a strong and influential community voice. We wanted a thriving and sustainable voluntary and community sector that co-designs and delivers to meet the needs of the residents. And finally, we wanted residents to receive the right help and support in order to lead independent, healthy lives with the skills, confidence and resources to support themselves and each other. So that was really the overall aim of the community task force. And a way that we did that, we had 4 very clear strands of work. And what they are, they're the cogs actually on the left hand side. So the first piece of work was around the data and the experiences of what people went through during the pandemic. So that really was about understanding our communities, the experience they had, how the pandemic may have affected them, and at different places. So the experiences won't have been the same across the borough for everyone. So we wanted to understand all the data that came in, and actually there was a resident survey that went out that that over, I think, 1,100 residents responded to. So that gave us some really, not only data, but actually gave us some really interesting stories about what people had experienced. The second piece of work was the piece of work that we're here tonight to discuss, and that was around having a new dialogue with our communities and residents. So really a new approach to engagement. I think that there'd been an acknowledgement for some time that the council, whilst it did have a relationship with its community and residents, it could be stronger, and it could be that there were certainly gaps in representation in the communities that it was engaging with. So it'd been on the radar to do as a piece of work for some time. And that became more urgent really once we realised how important it was to be able to engage with our communities if we really wanted to recover from the pandemic. So we're here really to talk about that piece of work tonight, and I'll come on to that obviously in a second. The third strand of the community task force was around our voluntary sector. So again, we realised that actually the voluntary sector really stepped up during the pandemic, and was one of the key places where residents, along with the council, along with friends and family, but that's where they got their support. So we wanted to understand the voluntary sector better, and understand how it could help us in a more strategic way going forward. And then the final piece was actually something called community solutions. Many of you will be aware of the community hub that was set up in the early stages of the pandemic, and how that really helped people, primarily in terms of food distribution or access to shopping offers or food banks, or the whole food offer, as we called it, across the borough through those early months of the pandemic. But what we did find during those early months is that people weren't just calling us about food. There were other more social underlying issues that people spoke to us about once they got on the phone to us. And actually we realised there was something there in terms of after the pandemic. You know, we would like to keep that model in place where there was one place where people could access, so they understood what was out there in the community that might be able to help them get through difficult times. But as I said, the focus of this evening's presentation is very much on the second piece of work, which was that new dialogue with our residents and the review of our approach to community engagement. Thanks, Moina. Next slide. So, in June of this year, we commissioned an organisation called Cllr, the Centre for Local Economic Studies, and we asked them to carry out a review of the community engagement approaches at the council. So, along with colleagues on the call tonight, in particular Ben Knowles, Mandy Skinner and Laura James, we worked with Cllr for a number of weeks, and they came in and really had a look at a real deep dive into everything we do around engagement. I think there is a real strong commitment, you know, talking to the likes of, at length really, talking to the likes of Councillor Dunn and Councillor Bath. I think there is a real commitment for a real change in the way that we engage with our communities going forward. Really sort of building on, I suppose, the appetite that came through during the pandemic. We want to grab that and take advantage of that, but make sure that actually when people give up their time and they do show that appetite to engage with us, that it actually has influence and it means something, and they can see that there's a purpose about engaging with the council. So Cllr came in, and what they did was they took a root and branch review of our approach to engagement, including analysis of the strengths and weaknesses relating to culture, knowledge and understanding, and the methods that we currently use. They painted a picture for us of what good would look like within the thoughts of those involved in the work and more broadly. So they spoke to lots of people across the piece during this review, and they also presented to us examples of good practice across the country, across London and further afield actually, and we talked with them about how we could learn from those areas of best practice, and ones which might work in Hounslow and some that obviously might not. So the methodology they used, they carried out benchmarking. They set up a framework to evaluate the existing engagement and reach. You know, really did actually take a good look at what we were doing and gave us a view of whether it was actually making a difference and serving its purpose. They had group interviews and workshops, So many of you, or some of you on the call tonight, may well have been spoken to. I know some of you had. They also spoke to a significant number of officers within the council, the actual area forum chairs themselves, and a variety of members. There were also focus groups with residents, those well involved in our structures and those not so. So they could get different perspectives from people in terms of how that engagement worked, whether you were part of the engagement structures or whether you were a resident in the borough that dipped in and out of its relationship with the council. So they took those views into account. And they also did a piece of work with us, which was around mapping the partnership architecture within Hounslow to identify really where there were currently places where we were engaged with residents and groups, and actually seeing what the gaps were and whether each of those was a success or not. So it really was an in-depth piece of work. But just to make the point, this wasn't really an organisation coming in and just doing this piece of work over there and then presenting us with a report. Laura in particular, who's our consultation and engagement manager, really did work with this organisation. They were working alongside us rather than over there. So it did feel like a joint review of what was going on. Thanks, Moina. Next slide. So, as well as some very clear recommendations, which I'll come on to in a second, what they did do, which we think will be helpful, is propose a model about how our engagement and how this conversation should start and go on in terms of reviewing our approach to engagement. So just to be very clear, what Cllr have given us is a report. They haven't given us our new approach to engagement. That's for the council, and that's for us to now start the conversation about. They've done a piece of work and made a series of recommendations, given us some ideas, told us where we currently are, and actually what happens now is this is the start of a journey to really develop our new approach to engagement. So this, I think, is the second area forum that we've visited. We've also spoken to the Residents Association Forum, about 20 to 30 people last week. We'll continue with the remaining 3 area forums, and then we will get out there and speak to the community. When obviously restrictions allow, we'll get out there, speak to the community, and really see what they feel about the approach and some of the ideas that we have. But in terms of the proposed way forward, what they have suggested is this very basic model that we would use, and we would use to develop our new approach, but then we would keep on using it. This is something that we would live with us always in terms of our approach to engagement. So I'll just quickly talk through the stages. So they're obviously self-explanatory, but obviously taking stock. So actually the review was the main part of taking stock. Actually, where are we now? What is the current situation? What's our starting place? Listening. That's where we are now as well. So we're going around at the moment, we're talking to people, giving this presentation, but as much as telling people what's going on and where we are, this is very much about actually hearing ideas, hearing people's thoughts and experiences about their contact with the council, and seeing how we can take that's on board to shape our service. We'll then reflect. So we need to understand what people tell us, take a moment to think about it. What does it mean? How do we interpret it? And what should that mean going forward? And that's when you then get into co-producing the local engagement mechanisms with people and with members. So we need to work out what forums will work. What will it look like going forward? What would we want to keep that we've currently got? What would we want to reinvent? And I imagine there's going to be a bit of both. And then ultimately, and to align with the council's new values, there will be an element of passing on the power. It's quite a grand statement, but really it just means actually that that the council should be able to trust the community and trust residents to do things for themselves and to actually assist in making decisions and taking ownership of situations. So as I said earlier, so this is very much actually the journey we're on at the moment in terms of to define our new approach to community engagement, but it won't stop. So we should be always taking stock. We should be always listening, always reflecting, always co-producing. So this really, if we think this works and if everyone is on board, this would be a model that we would keep with going forward. Thanks, Moina. Right. So some of the key recommendations that came out of the review from Cllr. I'll just go through them. So one of the things that really did come out strongly, and This was around local conversations with residents to consider priorities that are important to them, to support the needs of the communities and to gain a better understanding of how residents are engaged. What Cllr's really found out was that we're very good at inviting people to come and talk to us about things we want to talk about. And we tell people what's going on, and we consult with them and we ask them their views on what we're doing. But actually what we might need to do a bit more of is actually going to talk to people locally where they live in their communities and neighbourhoods and finding out what they want to talk about. You know, what are the issues that are key to them in their area, in their neighbourhood, in their street, and they will be different across the borough, and we need to accept that. This won't be, it doesn't need to be one size fits all. We should be talking to people about what they want to talk about in the areas that where they live and that are important to them. So they were very big on this, actually, these local conversations rather than borough. There will be times when the borough-wide conversation is appropriate, things that are relevant to everyone. But actually, there will be times when there are conversations that need to happen just about certain areas. So we also need to look at resources in this area. If the council is, and you know, I'm fairly confident the council is committed to a better approach to engagement and a more comprehensive approach to engagement, then we will need to commit resources to this area. It's not an area where the council has invested a lot of resources previously. So if we want to take on board a lot of the recommendations and we want to develop a new approach, we will have to have a commitment to resources to deliver what we want to deliver in this area. Something else that is obviously key tonight with regards to a forum such as this, but something else that jumped out really of the review was that, excuse me, councillors are very well connected in their, not surprisingly, very well connected in their communities and in their wards. But actually, when we talk about engagement and what engagement can do in terms of shaping services, do we really take advantage of that? Are the mechanisms in place for councillors to really use those relationships that they've got out in the communities that they build on a daily basis back into how services are shaped? And I think the conclusion that came from the review was perhaps not, or it could be something that certainly the council could be stronger at. It might happen in certain instances and in isolation, but not something really that happens across the piece. But it was interesting because I think we all know that the council hasn't been very successful in engaging with certain types of community groups, whether that's the BAME communities or younger people. But actually, councillors do have those links. So there's something there. There's a piece of work to be done to align that. We need to work with the community to reimagine our engagement mechanism so they focus on areas and locations people identify with and can enable co-production of local solutions for deeper engagement and better consultation. This is very closely linked to the first point. We need to have mechanisms that work for the areas that they're in. So there's no point us setting up certain kinds of structures or engagement mechanisms if that doesn't work for the residents in that area. We need to have a bespoke offer of engagement across the borough. We need to facilitate opportunities for social action by ensuring that the grant funding available in the borough works to support small-scale community projects as well as the larger interventions. We've got a really strong commitment to assisting local community groups and voluntary sector organisations to help the council come through recovery and deliver solutions out there in the community. Some of us at the meeting tonight, including Councillor Dunn and Mandy Skinner, who's the Assistant Chief Executive, we're involved on a weekly basis at the moment of assessing community projects who are applying for money through what was the Thriving Communities Fund, and this year is Council's Response Fund, the Council's Response Fund. And it's great because what we actually see is really sort of inspiring projects that can really help people across the borough, and the money can get out the door quickly, robustly. There's a very strong audit trail to making sure that it does hit the criteria for recovery through the pandemic, and people have benefited already from so much money going out the door in terms of community groups helping. We need to build on that going forward, actually. And how can we perhaps add an element of locality into that decision-making process? At the moment, it's very borough-wide, whilst we do consider the whole borough in our deliberation and those recommendations that go forward. Cllr was suggesting maybe there was a way that actually we could implement some sort of local decision-making in that kind of process. We need item number 6 there. We need to explore methods of engagement where a degree of decision making is devolved to citizens around participation approaches. So some local authorities do have conversations with their residents about decisions that can be made at a local level that are different for different areas, and that's something the council really does need to explore and embrace. And the final one really is just, again, making sure that whatever representative panels come out of the review and what remains, what doesn't remain, we have to make sure that actually they do embrace the one Hounslow concept of actually it being more than just about the council. It really needs to be about the borough in terms of, you know, all the relationships within the borough, whether that's voluntary sector organisations, public sector organisations, the council itself, private sector organisations, community groups really do need to have a stake in what we do going forward. So some really, we think, some real opportunities here to make a real difference if we can turn these recommendations into a really robust and clear implementation plan of a way forward. So I think we've just got one final slide, Moina. Thank you. Right. So going back to, I feel like I'm jumping around a bit, but bear with me. So in terms of the proposed way forward, going back to the model that we talked about earlier, this slide and the thinking here is really trying to give some ideas about some of the things that might go on at those stages of the model that I talked about earlier. And these are just ideas at the moment. So that taking stock, as I talked about, it's a real period of internal reflection, which we've done in terms of determining what we know and what we don't know about our communities, the community groups and local leaders. We need to reflect on the approaches that have worked well and which don't, and the mechanisms available for sharing local knowledge. So this is really around the piece of work that Cllr have done over a number of weeks during the summer months, really, and into the autumn. The listening phase, so the listening exercise focusing on understanding our many communities and their priorities. There's a piece of work going on in the Environment Directorate of the Council at the moment, talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods, and this is something that we might want to align with. And we also want to try and get out there in the community and see who local leaders are. You know, there are people who are really connected out there in the community that have really come to the fore during the pandemic. And we need to tap into people who have got a voice and influence in the community, and making sure that we are aligned to them and working with them. In the period of reflection, we want to build on the consensus on a one Hounslow approach to relationships with citizens, prioritising social research, intelligence and insight, and the mechanisms for sharing knowledge. So this is really around making sure that actually when we do go forward, we are doing it based on evidence and data and experiences that we know actually have happened and people have experienced. We actually need to try and make sure that when we're recruiting people, we attract people who are a reflection of our community and actually embrace the idea of community engagement. So we really need to make sure that actually when people are recruiting into roles that don't automatically scream out community engagement, that actually there's a mind towards that, because actually it's the responsibility of everyone who works for the organisation to have that relationship with the community. Whilst we're co-producing, we want to be working with citizens to jointly develop engagement mechanisms. So, like we said earlier, building on the success of the community hub, that really did. It was able to tap into the community and engage with the community really quickly. We found out through our resident survey that over 50% of residents, whilst they might not have had to use the community hub, they were aware of it in the early days of the pandemic. So we can get the messages out when we really want to, and when we work with the community. So we need to replicate those ideas. We need to make sure that people are feel empowered to get involved and to take a lead in shaping their local area. So I think it's vital that whilst we want lots of people to be engaged with us. We actually want lots of people not just to be engaged with us, but to actually feel like it's worthwhile being engaged with the council. Actually, I can see that my involvement makes a difference. Passing on the power. So we want to be innovative here. You know, we want to try things. You know, if things don't work, we'll stop them. We'll try something different. So we don't want to be wedded to one idea and then stuck with that. We do want to, when it comes to passing on the power and what things would be suitable for this, we really want to try things. It might be really hyper-local ideas around community groups and things they could decide in their area that traditionally the council would have taken the lead in. And as I said earlier, all of this being really under the One Hounslow banner, really, in terms of not just the council, but actually the council, the residents in the borough, the community groups in the borough, other stakeholders, the police, our partners in health, and actually the voluntary sector. So a real One Hounslow approach. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, really. The actual report itself from Cllr is going to be available on the website very shortly. So that you'll be able to look at the whole detail of what they did, the methods they used and what they found out. Today was very much a summary of their findings and the start of that conversation about actually what next for us. So in terms of very immediate next steps, we are actually working on, so myself and Laura and other colleagues are working on an implementation plan out of the recommendations that we can then start talking to people about, and that will be going to the council's cabinet in, I think, in December. So that will basically summarise the report, very much a report version, really, of what you've heard tonight, and then we will propose an implementation plan of some of the steps that will go forward over the coming months to come with that, as opposed to that new approach to engagement with our residents across the borough. So like I say, a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I don't know if actually Councillor Dunn wants to come in before we take any questions. Would you like to say a few words, Councillor Dunn?
Yes, for sure. Thank you very much, Elliot. Yeah, I think we did it the other way around last time, but not that it matters. So yeah, I mean, I've been working with Elliot and Mandy on this, and I want to thank them both, and also Councillor Bath, who's been involved, and the whole of the Community Partnerships unit at the council. You've heard our ambition, which is to develop a new approach to engaging with communities that builds on the ambitions that we set out in our Thriving Communities strategy and the corporate plan. So we were already working on that, but there's definitely been some changes, and the coronavirus pandemic certainly made us think about things differently, and in fact has given us an opportunity to do things differently, to build on and develop some of those new relationships with residents that were built up during those first stages of lockdown. And we really want to build on those based on transparency, trust and mutual respect with all the members of all our diverse communities, and with everyone able to make their voices heard. As Elliot has described, as we moved into thinking about recovery from coronavirus, which is obviously going to be ongoing for some time yet, the relationships that we'd started to build can now be prioritised and strengthened. Working through the Community Recovery Board, we followed the process as Elliot's described, leading and improving on our knowledge and our understanding and the representation of residents. So you've heard, I mean, I think that was a really great presentation from Elliot there, and I'd just like to finish, just to reiterate what he said, which is that this is just the start of a conversation. There's still some way to go, and we really want to hear what our residents think in terms of how we should be doing this as well. And so this meeting tonight is one way of reaching out and wanting to hear what you have to say. This is the second area forum that we've done, and we'll be doing all of them around the borough. We've been talking to ward councillors, and we'll continue that, and also our community groups, to understand how the different experiences of people in the borough can shape the approach. So please do ask questions tonight. It's your opportunity. Tell us what you think, and but it's not your only opportunity. There will be plenty of those conversations, and especially, as Elliot said, those local conversations in future as well. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. That was a nice presentation, and now I would move in for the members of the committee if they would like to ask any questions. And even I would like to inform the members of the public that if they would wish to ask any question, they can do it through the Q&A. Right, first I would ask Councillor Sukhbir Dhariwal if he has got any questions from Elliot. Okay, I move on to Poonam Dhillon. Any questions, Poonam Dhillon?
No, thank you. No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Khalik Malik.
Thank you, Chair. Thank
No
you,
questions?
Elliot. I am going to ask a question if you allow me.
Yes, certainly you are welcome.
Thank you, sir. Elliot, thank you very much for your nice presentation, Councillor Dunn. Good presentation, and thank you being with us in our area forum. My question would be, one thing it comes up very clearly during this time, the community and our volunteer sector. I think what they have done, especially here in Cranford, what we have set up a Cranford Action Group. During that, what we learned and what we experienced, it was tremendous. It was great. My question would be, during this pandemic and our recovery services, I would appreciate if you come up with a little bit comparison, what worked well and what we need to work on. And if we compare with other boroughs, how they've been working and what lesson we have to learn from them, a bit comparison, what we have done well and what we have to work on. I'll appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. An interesting question, actually, because it actually, there is a piece of work that alongside this review of community engagement, as I mentioned, we have actually been looking at our approach to working with the voluntary sector and making the most of volunteers. I mean, the response from volunteers, like you've said, was just phenomenal during the pandemic. I think the council had over 400 or 500 people formally register as volunteers, but actually hundreds more put themselves forward in their local community. And there is a piece of work that we are starting now with our voluntary sector colleagues to make sure that we don't lose that momentum, because whilst people, yes, they put themselves forward, many of them because they've been furloughed or they weren't working, so they were available. Many still want to continue. We've actually been speaking to people, and many do still want to continue in some shape or form going forward. So our role is to make sure actually that we have a really robust matching service from those people who want to put themselves forward to actually opportunities in the voluntary sector that are suited to the skills they have. So I think whilst I haven't got the information in front of me about how we compare to other boroughs, this is actually something that we have looked into, and we would be able, Chair, to send some information out to forum members around actually. We've got some data, like I say, I haven't got it with me tonight, but it does actually tell us in terms of the numbers of volunteers in our borough, and then actually the percentage that were then matched into roles during the pandemic and how we compare with other boroughs. So it is data that we have got, just not this evening, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Elliot.
If I could come in, Chair.
Sure, you can.
Great. Just to, I mean, not much to add really, but just say that there's obviously a question that's been published in the Q&A that also ties into that. So Kamaldeep there, who obviously volunteered with the Good Sam volunteering service. So I'm not sure how that, I can't remember how that tied in with our own community hub, but perhaps Elliot could comment on that as well.
Yep. So we did make referrals into Good Sam. So whether that was from people who needed help, then we would match them with people who would put themselves on the Good Sam app. So again, we got some data about about 2/3 of the way through the first lockdown actually, and we were quite high up in terms of actually numbers of matched volunteers and people needing support across London through the Good Sam app. So Camel Deep is obviously someone who's been through that experience, and actually we when I say we in Hounslow, we were very successful at that, and we did the residents of Hounslow did embrace the Good Sam app really.
Thank you, Elliot. Councillor Malik, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to request for that, but thanks for your putting me this. I know it's the beginning of our engagement with the local leadership and local community. Couple of things I like to know. That number one, how we move our resources towards that if there is engagement and there is something come up like in Cranford. We got a number of projects with our local leadership and local community they were working on, which is environment, is the key things which we are working on that. How we move resources towards it to support the volunteer or local community, and also how we recognize those volunteers and the leadership who really worked tremendously hard during this pandemic.
Okay, I think there's two. I think there's two parts to what you were saying there. One is around actually recognition, and the people who have helped, and how the council plans to, I suppose, recognise that. And I know actually that there have been conversations taking place both with I think cabinet members and senior officers around actually, I suppose, the appropriate time and the appropriate way to do that. We have to be mindful that for many people, the pandemic is still very much going on. So we have to be, I suppose, careful how we recognise the involvement of volunteers. But actually, it is something that I think is being planned. It might be something that actually a colleague of mine who may be here tonight, Ben Knowles, is here from communications, knows a bit more about. But I do want to reassure you that it is something the council is considering. The first thing that I think you raised was around resources and how do we direct resources to where they're needed. As I said at the beginning, really, in terms of the council has shown a commitment to community engagement going forward, and I think there is an acknowledgement that we do need more resources in this area. And actually, it's the sort of area that I think that if you do invest in more resources in community engagement and actually helping people in the community, that actually in the longer run it will save you money, because it will mean that actually if you can talk to people locally, if you can intervene in some of their situations really early, then actually it stops them becoming really complex and expensive and having to contact the council further down the line when they're in dire straits. So I think some investment in community engagement and community support actually will save the council some money going forward in some of its expensive statutory services.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Thanks, Councillor Dunn. Thank you, Chair, for letting me ask these questions.
You're welcome, Councillor. Okay, could I ask Councillor Harleen Atwal if she has any questions, please?
Hi, no questions as such, but just a comment. London Borough of Hounslow has done extremely well. I know we're going into our second wave at the moment, so it's a good opportunity to sort of learn from what we've done in the first, now that we're going into the second. But a lot of residents have come back and said that, London Borough of Hounslow has been amazing. So hats off and thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Grewal, please. Any questions? Councillor Grewal, any questions? You're muted.
Yeah, Thank you, Chair. Just very good presentation. And the recognition, as Councillor Malik has raised the issue of the local people doing a lot of volunteer work. What comes to the forefront is the feeding a lot of people, especially these disabled who are housebound people. They are volunteers doing a lot of tremendous sort of work. And the rationing, the foods being given at the church on Bath Road, and the volunteers doing it, and they're still doing it, and they got to be recognized somehow that they have done a tremendous amount of work. Just a pat on the back, I think, will make sure that more volunteers come through. And are there any plans to do that sort of thing?
Sure. I'm sure there are. Like I say, across the borough, really, volunteers have really stepped up, either formally through the structures where you can put yourself forward and be matched, but actually just those local, taking shopping to neighbours, whatever it might be. So I'm sure the council will be planning a method of, I suppose, recognising and appreciating those people across the borough who have stepped forward during the pandemic and helped out those in need and neighbours and other residents.
I mean, the comment I would make that it's really is very serious. It's a serious situation this virus has actually created. But at the same time, if you look at the blessing in disguise is that it's had brought the community together.
Well, you're right, Councillor. That's what we found in terms of it actually made us realise what the appetite that there is there in the borough to engage, to help out, and to be part of the community, and we don't want to lose that. We need to take advantage of it. Yes, so I think you're right. Out of the pandemic, there has come a positive actually in terms of people helping each other.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grewal. Could I ask Lily Bath if she has any questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions, but just a few comments, really. Firstly, thank you to Elliot, the presentation, Catherine, and all the officers. I mean, I have to say this was a really interesting piece of work to be involved in, and as Elliot has quite rightly said, how we engage with our communities is going to be really important moving forward. But I think one of the biggest things that came out, and we've all said it here tonight, is that the amount of goodwill that there was in the community in terms of supporting each other. And, you know, I was astonished. I couldn't believe the number of different groups that actually existed. And I think that was a real eye-opener. So I think, I mean, some of the key messages that came out of the whole of the work is really the recognition of the communities. I think that's really, really important. And I think we've said that a number of times today. But how do we actually support the small groups? Because we had a lot of discussions about this in terms of how the voluntary sector is made up. You often get small groups that are not very resilient in terms of being able to kind of apply for funding and become bigger, whereas you get bigger groups. You know what it's like, if you have a little bit of funding, you can attract more funding and it makes you more resilient. So I think this is going to give the council a great opportunity to support those groups so that they can really, you know, be a bit more active and a bit more stronger within their communities. I think that's going to be really important going forward. But I think also for me, I think as councillors, you know, not just on this forum, but you know, as councillors in general, elected members, we are really closely in touch with different parts of our communities, and I think it's going to be really important that we have some kind of mechanism and process in place, and I'm sure we will be doing this to make sure that we can facilitate action within our communities, because I think that sometimes is one of the frustrating part for members, isn't it? We hear what people in the community want, but we've got to find a way of facilitating that. So I think that will be a challenge that we have, and I think, you know, but I think it's important that we have recognised that this is really important going forward, because obviously we're in another lockdown. I'm constantly being contacted by people, not just who want to volunteer, but who are actually doing things which I didn't realise that they were. So how do we kind of harness all this and how we go moving, how we take this to our advantage moving forward. I think it's going to be really important. But I think it's really important piece of work, and well done to all, and well done to people within our community. I think that's fantastic. That's all I need to say for that at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Could I ask Balraj Rai if he has got any questions, please?
Hi, thanks, Chair. No questions from me.
All right, thank you. Councillor Amrit Man, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just add my weight and concur with all the positive comments that have been made by all my colleagues? The only thing I will touch upon is that there is an overlay, and we saw that in the race equality report, of 11 wards that are socially deprived. Whether we are going to realign some sort of additional funding to certainly tackle those 11 wards, bearing in mind that we're now imminent into going into the second phase. So that goodwill is supported, rather than where people find that they have a lot of goodwill but then lack the resources to provide the provisions. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, could I just quickly say something?
Sure.
So I've just remembered, I was just flicking through something as I was sitting here, but I think there has been a recent launch of the community heroes coming out, and awards around the pandemic and people who have really stepped up. So it's not something I've got lots of information on tonight, and I'm sure we can make sure this gets out to forum members, but it is something that the council has launched over the past few weeks. So we'll make sure that from our comms team, some information comes directly to committee members, to forum members.
Thank you, Elliot. Councillor Mann, do you have any supplementary questions?
I can maybe address.
Sorry, go on, Catherine. Then I'll come back afterwards. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Councillor Mann raises a really important point there about the fact that some areas of the borough are more deprived, and through the work that was done on race and other inequalities, we were able to find out that the 11 wards that were more socially deprived than others, which isn't to say that there aren't vulnerable or socially deprived people living throughout the borough, but it obviously, knowing that on where those areas are that have more, it helps us to direct resources to the right places. So I know that the team will be doing work on that to make sure that as we go into this second lockdown, that the way we support people will be, it will be targeted at those people wherever they are, but knowing where they're clustered is going to help us to actually do that in a way that makes sense and helps people where they don't necessarily have those resources themselves.
Yeah, Chair, if I can come in.
Sure, Amrit, you can.
Yeah, Catherine, that's accepted. There's no issues on that. I think there are very many people throughout the borough, but what I was trying to get at was that we've, in our own reports, we are identifying 11 wards. Genetics plays a key part, but it's not the only part. There are lots of other communities. Let's talk about if you're white, you're old, and you're unhealthy, you're just as likely to get corona or be affected by corona as anybody else. So we need to address those particular concerns. Where we're seeing that there's social deprivation, that is actually an area that we need to address, because that's key for tackling corona, not just social deprivation, because we find that the two almost are walking hand in hand at the moment within the reports that we are coming up with. So, you know, since we've identified those and we're at the cusp of the second lockdown, how are we utilizing our data that we've got so far to actually address some of those? That was what I was getting at.
So, Councillor, I think I can add something there. Am I off mute? Yeah. So when I mentioned earlier about some of the applications for funding that we get from some community groups, obviously what we are doing at the moment, we are making sure that when we get an application in, and many of the applications say they're going to address issues with certain groups of certain types of individuals in certain areas even. And actually, what we don't do is just think, oh, that sounds a good project, let's give the money. We actually go back to the data and the services within the council to say, is this a priority and a need? Is this cohort of people actually really suffering in the way that actually this is being presented to us? So there is a piece of work which actually where colleagues in the community partnerships unit receive the bids. They then go and speak to the services, actually, whether it's in children's services, adult services, mental health services, and say, actually, this is being presented as something to help, I don't know, Somalian women, for example. Actually, is there a need there? Will this hit the mark? Is this really something that we should prioritise? So we do try and direct resources to community groups, whether that's in certain locations or by ethnicity or whatever that might be, to where the need is. So it is something that's happening every day at the moment.
Chair, can I come in, just say something if that's okay?
Why not? Lily, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, just on a wider issue, everything that the communities, this work that's been done as part of the recovery of the borough, it intersects with everything else that's been done under the Community Recovery Board. So, for example, issues around poverty, equalities. So I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, it's not just a report that's not talking to any other areas of work that's being done within the council. It's a holistic approach. So yes, where there are poverty issues, of course, that is something that would need to be addressed. So it's not just we're going to do this here and do something that it's going to be a proper integrated approach. But you're absolutely right. You can't ignore issues like poverty and equality. You have to look at everything together, don't you, to have a fully recovery, and that is what will, I think that's what you were saying, weren't you? Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Lily. Any question, Councillor Grewal?
Chair, no questions, and I welcome the report, review rather.
All right, thank you very much. I can see a question from Shaida Mehban in the chat. Would you be able to address that, please?
Sorry, I can't see it. Could someone read it?
Yeah, I can read it out if you like. It's so this is from Councillor Mehban saying, if I could ask a question, please. I'm a councillor in Hounslow South, but live in Heston Central. And because I live and work quite closely with the community, I have noted there are a large number of Asian households who are still very much trying to learn, connect and engage with others. However, the language barrier seems to be preventative in connecting with different groups, languages and their individual barriers. How are you addressing this, and what success, if any, have you had?
Okay, so this is something that we're aware of, actually. I mean, someone did tell me recently the number of languages spoken in Hounslow. It's incredible. I think it's over 100, and I can't remember the number, but I was flabbergasted. We need to really make sure that we take advantage of community groups because actually, you know, whilst we do have a number of languages obviously spoken in at the council, that's not always the option. We do have a number of key languages that we get everything translated into and can get documentation translated into, but that's really where we need to take advantage of the community groups, local councillors, where they are connected in to local people in their local communities, so that they can actually play that role between, sometimes where needed, the council and residents and councillors. So it's something that is on our radar that needs further work, but there are sort of solutions there at the moment.
Thank you, Elliot, and I thank you very much for your presentation. It was excellent.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a petition.
Sorry,
and
Chair, can I just add one small bit, which just for the language, how many language in our borough? 188 languages we speak in our borough.
Thank you for the information. Thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the petition which was submitted, but we have already got a response from Matthew Rees, and please, I would like that to be noted. Now we go on to open forum for question and answers, and I believe there have already been 2 or 3 questions submitted before. And Gareth, can you address them, please?
Yes, I certainly can. And also, I realised I was reading the chair's guide and that I was supposed to introduce myself earlier as well. So I'll
sorry
take
about that.
Opportunity.
Sorry.
No, my fault.
Please,
I take this opportunity to do that. So yeah, some regular attendees will recall I'm Gareth James, the long-standing area participation officer for the Heston and Cranford Area Forum, and I am an officer in the transport section as well. So the questions that were submitted in advance, you can see that they are in the Q&A section. So I'm just going to read out the answers that we have for those ones, and then there's a couple of more questions that have come in this evening. So we'll just make sure that they have also been responded to. So first of all, we've got a question from Mr. Philip Rosser, the chair of the Heston Action Group. And that said, what is the regeneration and development plan for Heston that reflects the council commitment to the climate crisis? So the response that we've been provided with is that the Borough Local Plan and the London Local Plan factor in climate emergency targets, together with planning guidance to ensure regeneration and development in Heston reflects the council's commitment. So before I go into the next question, I don't know if any members would like to add anything to that, or whether you would prefer to wait until the 3 or 4 questions have been read out. Councillor Chair, would you prefer that we sort of group them, or would you like to give a chance for members to add input regarding that particular question and answer that I just read out?
Yeah, if any committee members would like to put in some advice, why not?
Chair.
Yes.
Chair, can I suggest that we group that 3 or 4 questions together, because then it gives us the opportunity, right, to talk about those areas that we want to, instead of having a question where nobody wants to ask additional supplementary question or anything along those lines. Yeah, so if we just group them, that would be best.
But the second question is not relevant to the first question.
It doesn't matter, does it?
Okay, fine. If that's the way you feel happy, I got no problem with that. Okay, Gareth, you can go.
Yeah,
to the
thank you.
question.
I think that should work for this evening, because we only had 3 questions submitted in advance, because of course I imagine residents are still getting used to this, like we all are. But in the future, if we have more questions, we'll need to try to sort of group them so that there's a theme. But I think it should be okay for this time. So the second question was from Mrs. Pav Carlin. Saying, having been a resident in Heston for 45 years, the transformation is distressing. It was a sleepy village where it was safe for your children to play out and your elderly could sleep safe at night. It's now been transformed into an area riddled with drug dealers openly dealing on roads and cars driving at 50 miles an hour in 20-mile-an-hour designated zones, with local areas in disrepair. The school run is a nightmare where nobody adheres to yellow lines, let alone the foresight of thinking about the safety of young children. What is the plan to increase foot community policing to support and eradicate the above? And then there's a specific question about a sign at a roundabout at the junction of Springwell Road and Cranford Lane, that a request had been made to have it reinstated 3 months ago because it's a major accident waiting to happen. And says, I received an email 4 weeks later saying the job had been completed, but no sign is in place. So please, can you confirm why there aren't tougher practices in place, and confirm that your third-party partners are saying jobs have been done and they're not wasting taxpayers' money? So that was the second question. Oh, sorry, and then there's it went on to my next page, just a closing paragraph to that saying the area is in a downward spiral but not beyond repair. You receive a lot of revenue from this area, and if you do not start to pay attention and rectify the issues, the people who paid these local taxes will move on to better areas, as they have already started to do. I wait to hear from you. So that was the second question, and then the third one again. This is all in the published Q&A that you can sort of read along as well. The third question said, we would like to know more about the waste and recycling. Sorry, this is from Amy Bardell from Lullaby's Day Nursery, saying we would like to know more about the waste and recycling in Hounslow Borough, for in particular referring to fly tipping down and around Church Road in Cranford, TW5, and would like this to be raised at your meeting tomorrow on an update for long-term solutions for the road. So I have received a response for that one, which I will read out now. So that is that there is a joint partnership project occurring regarding the large fly tipping problem on Church Road and the surrounding green open spaces. This will be looking at both short and long-term interventions and is taking a problem-solving approach. We have council teams, housing, enforcement, CCTV and environmental services, Hounslow Highways, Green Space 360 and the Metropolitan Police all working together to put in solutions to help the community, businesses and schools in this part of Cranford. We will provide a more detailed update to the Heston and Cranford Area Forum once the plan and solutions have been agreed and as interventions are implemented. So that was all three questions. You'll have noticed I didn't read out a response to the second question. We hadn't had time to prepare that, so perhaps we can allow members to make any comments, and also as the transport officer, I'm also happy to try to speak to a couple of the transport issues that were raised in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. I would like Amrit Maan, if you have any comments to make on the second question.
Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity first. What Pav Carlo, I think, because from after reading the thing, I think her name is Pav Carlo.
That's correct.
She actually puts it in a nutshell. We're all suffering from this blight. I concur with her 100% that there is too much drug dealing. There's lots of road traffic, speeding, late night horning, nuisance noise, fighting. I mean, this is happening outside my house, never mind Pav Carlon's house. So a lot of people are moving out of this area because we're also blighted with aggravated burglaries, right, or attempted burglaries around this area. So people are getting fed up to their back teeth, even to a point where residents group in my road are thinking of withholding taxes because they're not actually getting any benefit from the police service, from the local authority in terms of waste. It's more dirty, our roads, after the binmen have been, right? They're supposed to clean up afterwards with a broom. They never do. They never do. And all the crap is moved all over the place because if it's windy, it's just moved further down, and it ends up towards the end of the road where predominantly I live, or it's the bushes at the end, right? The difficulty is that no matter who you speak to in the council, you don't get any joy. Hounslow highways are absolutely useless. They're part of the problem, and I think we really need to get rid of them, right? Because they don't address. We've had this walkabout in our wards. And even the trees that we pointed out almost 2 years ago, they've not been done. And what Pav Collin is saying is absolutely spot on. But she's not the only one. There's lots and lots. I can go down my road. I can tell you what everybody's saying. The difficulty is that, and I've spoken to you this with you many times on this. The moment our residents feel that we as council are not delivering, they just stop voting for us. And that's coming. And I want you to address, I want the council to address some of the concerns of the residents. And I fear that, what's it called, if we don't do anything, then we're just turkeys voting for Christmas. Thank you.
Right, thank you for your comments, Councillor Mann. I will make sure that this problem is addressed, and I will speak to the authorities concerned. That's all I can do at the moment. I can answer you that.
If I can come back, right? I know that police colleagues are not on this panel at this moment because of the COVID issue, but certainly, you know, there must be a mechanism whereby you can get in touch with all the neighborhood police teams. I will do that as the councillor that sits on my neighborhood watch team, but centrally, as a chair of Heston and Cranford Area Forum, you have the authority to write to our police colleagues and getting them to address some of these issues, because drug dealing is so prolific. People have actually stopped reporting this because they say the police don't do nothing.
Thank you. We'll look into it, certainly. Any other comments from any other councillor?
Yes, could I? Sorry,
yes,
Arlene, could I just say something?
Yes, sure.
I'd just like to back what Amrit just said regarding Hounslow highways. You know, they're getting a bit boring now because the work never gets done. Like, we have all these, you know, ward walkabouts with them. We address problems and nothing ever gets back. It's basically just double the work for us because it never gets done, kind of thing. You know, I'd really put my hand up for a change. We need a change. And, you know, from residents are getting fed up, you know, of repeating the same thing. It's been like 2-3 years. It's just the same thing. We're just going round and round in circles. It's getting boring now. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your output, and I will certainly ask.
Can I say something, Chair?
Sure, Lily, you can.
Yeah, can I say something? Yeah, just to say, it's disappointing to hear that, you know, so many of our members here are very sort of hacked off with Hounslow highways. I mean, the whole point of doing a ward walkabout in your area is to identify some of the issues that you've got, and some of them can be long-standing. I mean, I had a particular one in our area the other day, which had been an issue for a while, but I worked with Hounslow Highways together with the residents to get it resolved. And I think that's what we do as elected members. That's what we're here for. So if there is something in your ward that you think is not being addressed and you're not happy, then it's important to take it further. And, you know, if there's a whole group of issues that you think that maybe we can get, you know, Councillor Lambert to come here and talk to us about having a strategic approach to it. But I think by just saying, oh, you know, Hounslow highways are no good, end of, it's just not good enough. That's what we're here for. We as elected members have a responsibility to make sure that we look at some of these issues and we work with our residents to get them resolved. Some of them are not going to be resolved overnight, but some of them will. So I think it's just not good enough to say they're no good, end of, let's do something else. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I come in at all?
Yes, colleague, you can.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Appreciate that. I really support Councillor Mann, what he just come up with, and I am absolutely support the question which was raised. Lily, you raised a good point that we as a council, what we need to do. I'll give you an example. 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I am out when they come up for pick up all our recycling stuff and all this. And I really echo Councillor Mann what he experienced, what I experienced, once they clear up, there is a more mess on our road than what they clear up. And I have raised this number of times with the concerned people, and I have invited Councillor Lambert last week, as you suggested. That's what we need to do. We had 2.5 hour walkabout with the concerned director as well. And this week, when the clear up was exactly the same, no difference whatsoever. That's one thing. In terms of fly tipping and environmental issue, Lily, you know that what action Cranford Action Group they're doing in Cranford, and my support and my encouragement are always with them. And after all this, you clear up one area, one park, and you go back next week exactly the same. Also, in terms of parks, antisocial behavior, and the drug issue, I've been raising one after the other for the last, you can see in area forum, my voice in terms of drugs and doing something about it is for the last years and years. Yet I have to go out and report to the police and call police for the people at evening time in our park taking drugs and antisocial behavior fighting. And I have to go out because resident, they call me. Things are not getting better. So we probably, in terms of policing, we need to improve and do something different or better. In terms of fly tipping, we need to come up something different, because the way we are working typically is not working well towards what the resident they expect us to do. And in terms of drugs, it's been ongoing for many years, no change, even worse. We, as a member, elected member, we need to put our act together, I believe. This is the time we are closing up our selection and election. I think we need to look at that way, what we can do differently, which works well for our resident. This is the time for change and improvement. Chair, thank you very much for your giving me time, opportunity to come up with these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khalik. I really appreciate the concerns.
Chair, can I come?
Just let me say something, Ms. Khalik. Councillor Khalik, thank you very much for your concern. Could you please give me some suggestions how we can resolve this matter? And I certainly will take this up with the concern.
Thank you, Chair. One thing, I'll give you an example of what we then done in flight, reference to the fly tipping in Cranford. We set up a Cranford Action Group and the ownership of a local community, which they lead, and they invite a resident, and we have set up a group chat, which all our local community member, they communicate, they come up, and we every weekend, probably twice a week or every weekend, we come together, we spot a certain area. These are the key issue of fly tipping. We go there. I'll give you an example of last Saturday, probably, we had nearly 30 people working and nearly two lorry load of rubbish we cleared from Way Avenue Park. This is
yes,
what
Mr. Malik, Councillor Malik, I'm aware of that, and thank you very much. You're doing an excellent job.
No, thank you. It's not a chair for what I do. This is what we should be doing anyway. But the point is where the resources of Hounslow Highway, which has just highlighted Councillor Mann, how we can get the support from Hounslow Highway. We've been doing work about, it's not working. So we need to look at that way in which we can work differently, which work for our resident, because at the moment we are getting worse and worse day by day. This is, Chair, if you can take up as a chair of our area forum for all the 3 sector policing, fly tipping, and the antisocial behavior. That sort of things are really affecting our resident. So if anything can be done through you, Chair, it will be welcomed.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Grewal, please do come in.
Thank you, Chair. Guy Lambert's name was mentioned. Obviously, Chair, you are aware that he came with, and you were there as well. And what happens afterwards is the situation is the same. Situation does not improve. That's the problem. Even Guy can't really do anything himself. And the officers from the who are responsible for this, they don't change and they don't take any notice of it.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and I will note them and I will act on them.
Sure,
Can
if I can come in, Chair.
Chair,
Yeah.
can I? Oh, sorry,
Chair.
Amrit, you go first. Sorry, you go
Yeah,
first.
Amrit, please.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, what's it called? No disrespect to the deputy leader, but we as councillors, we do our very best. And that's what we promised, right, to all our residents on the doorstep. And really, you know, when we do our very best and it doesn't lead anywhere, then there is a loss of faith, right, in us. So even to a point, as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, residents are thinking about taking ownership of the services for waste collection, for security. In fact, they're looking to put around Norwood Green special cameras, you know, ANPR cameras, to reduce crime, because the police have suggested that you might want to do this, and residents are so afraid they're willing to cough up to £200 to get this done. But what our problem is that we report, as rightly we should as councillors, but that reporting leads nowhere. That's the problem. And you can bring in Guy Lambert as many times as you like, unless he comes and picks the litter himself, right? I've been on ward walkabouts 4 times. In 4 of those times, I've suggested that the saplings that they've planted, they've had their barks taken off by the grass cutting verge, which is given to a third-party contractor. They were supposed to come and put stakes in the ground so that doesn't happen. Guess what? 4 years since then, there's not a single stake, and some of the saplings have died, right? So you tell me where we're supposed to go to highlight this problem.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Lily Bart, you wanted to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you. I can't make any comments about policing, so obviously that's up to the police. You know, that's their role, and they're not here. But just in terms of councillors and Councillor Malik mentioned all the work that he's done in his action group, and I'm aware that, you know, a lot of litter picking is going on, and I think we've done really well. I think as you know, as groups of councillors supporting our residents to do that. But what the thing that I'm not sure about, and I suppose that's something that, Chair, you'll need to take away. I know Councillor Mann has given an example of something that's not been done, but I'm not really clear about what Councillor Malik was stating that hasn't been done. So, for example, if I report fly tipping or anything like that, it generally 99% of the time it gets picked up almost immediately. So if you're talking about changing behaviour of people who do the fly tipping, then yes, that is more of a challenge, and that's things that we need to look into. And I think you know, the council's had a lot of different campaigning, and you've seen it all over the years about how to try and get people to change their behaviour so that they're not fly tipping. The council will pick up you know, as soon as they possibly can, but what we're really looking at here is changing behaviour. And I think if anyone's got any particular you know, ideas on what the council can do better, well, of course, you know, it's always, the council's always ready to listen. But I wasn't sure what some of the concerns that people had, apart from what an example that Councillor Mann has given. I'm not exactly sure. Are people saying things are not being picked up? I don't know, but that's something that I think it might be worth collating information from members here so that we can take that forward. Because that's not my experience. I mean, if I'm reporting fly tipping, it gets picked up.
Chair, can I come back a little bit if you allow me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lilybad, I totally agree with you. It's been picked up. Once you report, a 99% it picked up the fly tipping. But the problem and frustration of the resident is that then again, next day you see the fly tipping takes place. What we can do about it? This is what the frustration is. Next day, after next day, somebody come back and again do the fly tipping. This is the frustration is, Chair, which I am speaking. And I really, one thing through this, through you, Chair, and through this our Heston and Cranford area forum, can I say thank you to all residents, all of Cranford, especially residents, who are working tremendously hard to improve our area in terms of litter picking, fly tipping, reporting through Fix My Street, really taking ownership in Cranford. I'm really grateful the work they've been doing, but as a member, we need to do something differently, which improve the things. As far as I'm aware, we have signed cleaner and greener borough. So we need to work towards it. Please, we need to do something differently to improve further what residents expect us to do. Thanks, Chair.
Could I just say something?
Yes. Hello, who wants to comment?
Hi, it's Haneen. I just wanted to say, you know, I'd like to give recognition to the hangers group as well that have been out for the last 2 years clearing up rubbish on a regular basis. I think, fly tip gets picked up the next day as soon as you report it, but I think it's a style of how they pick it up. Like they said, general waste is collected, but then it's not swept after, so more of the waste ends up on the streets rather than collected and taken away. I think that's the main issue that we have. Yes, it gets picked up, but half of it ends back on the streets. So we need to look into that.
Sure.
Chair,
thank you very much.
Chair, can I come?
Yes, Poonam Dhillon.
Yeah, Chair, I am agreed with the Councillor Malik. What he says totally, the Cranford Action Group is working hard, and really, I'm agreed what he says. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair, may I come in?
Who's that?
Shantanu.
Sure, Shantanu, you can come in, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. This has been a really interesting debate, and you know, it's raised obviously some issues that we need to look at. I suppose from my perspective, and it comes back a little bit to what Lily said earlier in terms of, you know, our role as councillors. Now, I appreciate, you know, as councillors in this committee, we've you know, we report things and we feel like things maybe don't get done. But as far as I'm concerned, if something doesn't get done, I report it again and again and again, and I keep going, because that is my role, and that's what I do. And we have to remember that as an administration, you know, Councillor Mann was deputy leader in charge of waste and recycling, and he led the implementation of the new waste and recycling system that we've got in place at the moment. So, you know, it's incumbent on us as councillors and as the administration to really change it. So I fully appreciate, and I'm not disparaging anyone here who says that they've invited Councillor Lambert and they feel like nothing's happened. If that's your feeling, then please do report it again and keep inviting Councillor Lambert until you start seeing the change that you want to see. I know he is very receptive to it, and I fully take on board Councillor Malik's point about thinking about how we do things differently. So again, you know, that's a positive suggestion. On the policing, obviously, you know, as a council, we know that, you know, over the last decade, we've done nothing but cut core services and cut money out of the budget, and there's very little left. An example on policing is members of this committee will know that we've paid for a police team, and in the past, that was provided to us on a 2-for-1 basis. So for every one officer we paid for, we actually got 2 officers. That arrangement has come to an end, and so we had a fundamental decision to make here. Do we reduce the number of local community police officers we have, or do we carry on funding it out of our own budget? And we've rightfully decided to carry on paying for the same number of officers, with looking to grow that in the future, potentially, if budgets allow. But I take on board what you're saying around perhaps targeting that a little bit better. Some of the technologies that Councillor Mann mentioned are not cheap, and yes, he's probably right that residents are probably at their wits' end, and I have every sympathy for them. And if they are asked to cough up, I think that is sad, but that's not because the council is trying to make money. That is just because there is not enough money to be able to do everything that we would like to do. So this is a continuous process, and that's the point that I'm trying to make here. In understanding residents' frustrations, you take a sort of blinkered view of it and say, well, if something's wrong and you really want it fixed, you just have to keep on going, understanding the pressures that the services have. That's all I wanted to add to that debate, and I genuinely do appreciate what all colleagues have said tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, and we will move on to the.
Sure. Before you move on,
can you make it short, please? This time?
Yeah. I can make it short, but this question is actually only to Councillor Shivraj, because he's in charge of the finance element of it. I've been tasked with trying to find out that the residents don't want to pay their council tax. Certainly, the precept which is related to waste and recycling and policing, right? And they want to opt out of that option to do it themselves. Is there a mechanism to do that? If so, how do they proceed?
Chair, I will be honest, my gut instinct on that, and this is just a gut instinct, is that there is no mechanism for that. But I'm very happy to investigate that and come back. I mean, just to be clear, the council tax element includes the waste and recycling. The precept that we pay to the mayor includes the policing element, so they're slightly different. But Councillor Mann, I will go away and find out and write to you if that's okay.
Thank you, Shantanu. Now we move on to the first question of the Q&A, which is from Mr. Philip Rosser. Gareth, could you give any comments on that?
I'm not sure that I could add much now. The climate emergency, of course, has been the plan has been pulled together by my wider section, Transport and Environmental Services. I think that's the specific question related to the kind of the planning framework. Okay. And while I do know that there is work, as with all of our departments, going on to address the climate emergency in every way that we can and treat it as a true emergency, and I am involved in that. But I think that I would need to, unless one of the members would like to speak to it, I think I would need to go away and look into that a little bit more specifically with colleagues in the relevant departments. So happy to do that. I obviously do work quite closely with the Heston Action Group, as most of the people on this call have done, and I'd be happy to take that up with Philip directly as well. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Gareth. And now we move on to the next item, which is, do we agree the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on 23rd January 2020?
Right, yeah. We did miss the first item. Apologies for absence of declarations of interest.
Oh yes, any apologies?
It's just that we missed a whole chunk of the script, so if you could
yeah, okay.
Just take apologies.
Any apologies or absence, declaration of interest, or other communication from members?
Kanwaljit Kaur, if she's not on.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Chair.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I'm not too sure Councillor Dhaliwal is here or not, but if he's not, can you take his apology, please?
Sure.
Chair, may I just interject on a couple of small points? Firstly, yeah. I'll need to double check, but my understanding is that Councillor Kaur and I believe Councillor Dhaliwal have been present but dialed in. I know that's certainly the case for Councillor Kaur. So before we kind of confirm those apologies, we just need to make sure that is the case. And then the other thing was just with regard to the second question from earlier. I think when you asked for the extra comments, it might have been the second question that you were thinking of, which we didn't have the answer for. So that was the one from Mrs. Pavkarlan, which I know that members did respond to aspects of it, but the transport part. And what I'll do, I do have Mrs. Carlin's email address, so I'll contact you, Mrs. Cullen. I hope you're still listening, to find out where the that speeding is occurring exactly, and where the enforcement or non-enforcement on the yellow lines is occurring, and I'll also look into the missing signs. So I'll get back to you directly on that this week. Thank you.
Gareth, would you mind copying the Heston Central and Heston West councillors on that response?
Sorry, that was Councillor Rajawat, was it?
Yeah, sorry, Gareth. It was just to ask if you could copy in the Heston Central and Heston West councillors on your response.
Yeah.
Could I just ask why we don't have a police report as well, because we normally do?
Well, we could have it. Nobody could. The police officers couldn't be present due to the COVID-19.
Okay, I'm sure they could have arranged to be online like we are. You know, everything is possible.
Yes, they could, but unfortunately, probably they have some technical problems.
Okay, so could we please arrange?
Decided. The
Have
agenda
it
Next time we'll have it. No problem.
Okay.
So the agenda was decided collectively in the area chairs and vice chairs forum as a 2-item agenda, and so no police report was added to any of the area forums.
Right, okay, we move to the 5th item, which is, do we agree with the minutes of the meeting held in January, 23rd January?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, the date of the next meeting is to be confirmed, and everybody will be informed about that. And that's we come to the end of the meeting. And thank you very much for participating.
Chair, any other
business, sir?
I want to come with that.
Okay. What would you like, please? Yeah. Okay, Poonam.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair. The cabinet have proved the street space that impact the Cranford High Street and Berkeley Avenue near Cranford Primary School. I've been approached by the residents. They are not happy with that scheme. At the current situation, if the residents not happy, then we are not happy too. So we are not supporting this. As a ward councillor, we are not supporting this, Chair. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much. This issue will be brought up in the coming Labour group meeting, and you can certainly express your views there.
Sure, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Grewal, if you like, I can potentially just respond a little bit to that about that specific question, or that Councillor Dillon had. Yeah, Councillor Dillon, just so you know, I was the officer who originally worked on that school street scheme for that particular school, and I have been in direct contact with them for some time, for years now. So what I'll do is I'll contact the school and also any residents that you are aware of that are unhappy. I'm happy to speak directly to them to try to kind of help understand their concerns. But please be aware, of course, that the consultation on all the street space measures remains open, and we would continue to encourage residents to provide feedback on all of those measures. But that specific scheme I will look into directly myself as well.
Sure, I will.
Thank you. And I thank everybody for participating in tonight's meeting. And
Chair,
yes,
my apologies to intervene. My resident in Cranford, they are texting me that if there is any opportunities, Chair, for next area forum, if they've been allowed to ask question, especially from Cranford Action Group, they got a number of questions they wanted to ask. They missed the opportunity. Any opportunity for next area forum to allow them to ask this.
Malik, Councillor Malik, they have the complete right, and they can ask in Q&A. Not a problem at all.
Thank you very much. Any chance what they're asking for, lively like we used to have question openly directly from them on the day, rather than
The questions will be through the Q&A. They can type in the question and the question will be answered, but they cannot participate lively.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. And thank you very much, everybody.
Just one more thing I wanted to say before you guys all run off. I'm not going to let you get away that quick. Because this meeting has been a huge success and it's been really good, you know, today's technology. So could we please have a next meeting sort of in the next few months? It'd be good. Thank you.
I would like to add as well.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone who arranged the meeting, and Chair, to you as well.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Really good meeting. First virtual
evening,
meeting.
everybody.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just add about the questions? That they are welcome to submit the questions in advance to the Heston and Cranford Area Forum mailbox.
Yeah.
If they do want them addressed in the meeting. So there are, you know, many formats for them to ask their questions in advance of the meeting, as well as through the Q&A on the night.
Yeah.
If Councillor Merritt wants to pass that on to his residents. Thank you.
Thanks for clarification.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Chair, thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.